Hello everyone, thanks for tuning into the first month-ahead forecast of 2017. So we're going to have a look at January for the month-ahead forecast, of course, because we started the first month of the year. We'll have a quick review of December, and we'll also have a sneak peek at February at the end of the video as well. Of course, that'll be the final month of the winter, so we're already getting well on into winter. We've had very little winter so far, but we'll see whether there's any sign of a change as we look ahead through the month ahead. Well, before we get on with that, just to say about the ads, so links to articles on all the pages. If you have a browse, which is a click through the links, going to help us to pay for our website, and thanks very much for doing that. There's also video ads, both pages, which own content. When you watch your close book, again, just help to pay for gazworthies.com. This is going on to a new page at Gazworthies, so we have a new page for the month ahead forecast for the whole of 2017. So don't go to the 2016 page. You can find a link to the new page on our homepage, and that will take you to the month ahead forecast for 2017. There'll be a little written report that goes with this as well if you can't watch the video all in one go. So very quickly talk about December. The forecast wasn't very good for December, so we predicted sort of near average temperatures, really. Was a bit unsure about whether that would come out ever so slightly below or ever so slightly above average, but overall we wasn't expecting a big deviation. And we expected a fairly dry month as well. Well, that part of the forecast panned out quite nice. It was a very dry February for most parts of the country, with rainfall significantly below average again. But the temperature side of things went rather wrong, and that happened because we didn't get the cold weather that we expected in the second half of the month. We thought that we'd start off fairly cold, which is what happened. Then we'd go milder up towards the middle part of the month. That was okay. But instead of moving back to colder conditions later in the month, although we did get a little cold snap after Christmas, but it was fairly insignificant, really. Instead of moving back to the cold conditions that we expected in the second half of the month, we generally stayed mild up to and over Christmas, and then just got a little bit colder from frost and fog right at the very end of the month. So the centering temperature for December, we haven't got the full stats in for the UK yet, but the centering temperature for December came out at 6.0, which is a mild month. It's an anomaly of around 1.5 degrees above both the 61 to 1990 and 81 to 2010 average. The December average for 81 to 2010 is lower than all of the averages because of the cold Decembers that we had in the 1990s. Had a run of fairly cold Decembers then, and also, of course, for December to remember in 2010, the severe cold December. That sort of lowers the December average for 81 to 2010. So actually, the 81 to 2010 December average is the same as 61 to 1990. I think that's the only month that is the case in terms of December. So anyway, it was about 1.5 degrees milder than average, so it wasn't close to average as we expected, and therefore I think our last monthly forecast of 2016 was not particularly good, to say the least. So things went rather wrong there. But we're going to go on and have a look at what January might have in store. So I always say with long-range forecasting, it is just for fun, really. It's not to be relied upon. Anything over around 7 days, in some circumstances anything over 5 days, comes with a health warning. When you're talking about 30-day or 90-day forecast, then it really is just in the realm of just for fun. And I make a bit of a joke of it when I do the long-range updates, but it's an important point, actually, always to remember that we're just showing you what the charts are suggesting and what we think might happen, but there is never a guarantee with weather forecasters over a few days. Sometimes there's never a guarantee of weather forecast. It's just a few hours into the future, so it just depends on the situation. But we'll have a quick look at January first of all, and this is our 700 millibar height anomaly from the CFS V2 for January. Now, on the face of it, this looks like it could be quite a coldish month because it's showing a ridge of high pressure through the central Atlantic, and then it takes it up towards Iceland and Greenland, and also we've got hints of blocking around Svalbard as well. And then we've got this cold trough extending through central parts of Europe, which you would think would ensure that winds are probably coming in from the north or northeasterly type direction. So on the face of it, that ought to be quite a coldish month. The only thing I'm a bit concerned about there is that the centre of the heights is like to the west of Ireland, which does allow the possibility of quite an Atlantic influence. And I think we're certainly going to get that Atlantic influence later this week and through, excuse me, into the second week of the month. So that means that the temperature anomaly for most parts of Europe is coming out with a colder than average month. So, I mean, from Spain, through France, into Germany, over to Poland, I mean, down into the southeast and east of Europe, we're coming out colder than average quite widely, really, from west to east. Further north, Scandinavia, little area of cold and average temperatures, but it's near normal, really, for Scandinavia, and most of the UK and Ireland coming out near normal as well. But you notice there is an absence of milder than average temperature anomalies. They're really across Greenland and Iceland, where we've got the blocking area of high pressure. So you would assume actually we have a greater chance of a colder than average month for January based on what the CFS is doing. It's also going for another drier than average month. That follows on from the dry conditions that we had in December. Of course, we had mostly dry months right the way through the mid and latter part of the summer, actually, and then on into the autumn and now into winter, having a long run of pretty dry weather. So another drier than average month being forecast by CFS V2, not just for the UK, but for most northern, northwestern parts of Europe. But wetter average precipitation anomalies are down into the southeast of Europe. But that does look like a fairly good signal for most of Europe anyway, be having a colder than average month. The British Isles, as always, is on the periphery of that, between the cold ocean, the cold landmass and the warm ocean. So it's less of a signal for us, it's a weaker signal for us, but overall, for most of Europe, that's quite a strong signal for cold and average, particularly in the east. Let's have a look at Beijing Climate Centre. So this is our 500 millibar height anomaly for the month of January 2017. It's predicting an area of above average heights out to the west and then a trough up to the northeast. If you go up here, the trough is through Scandinavia, which means that the jet stream is doing something just a little bit like that, which does give us a bit of an Atlantic influence, really. So I think the signal for a cold and average month is weaker with the Beijing Climate Centre compared to the CFS V2. What the CFS is doing, it's taking that ridge, and it is through the Atlantic, but it's taking it further north up to that sort of area, which leaves us with more of a, or potentially more of a northeasterly type influence. But Beijing Climate Centre doesn't take the ridge that far north, and essentially it does have a more Atlantic influence. Now that's what I think is probably going to happen, certainly through the first half of the month, but we'll have quite an Atlantic influence to all of this. So if you have a look at the 10-day breakdowns from the Beijing Climate Centre, for the coming 10 days, first 10 days of January, the 1st through to 10th, has the ridge out to the west, and then the jet stream is going through rather like that. So the cold air with this is extending through the north and the east of Europe around here with this trough, and we're placed with more of an Atlantic influence through the first 10 days. Then we go through to the second 10 days, which is the 11th to the 20th, and this looks more unsettled and Atlantic driven. The ridge is pushing back towards Bermuda over here, and we're bringing the Atlantic through. So this could be a bit transition. It might be that we start off with probably settled weather, then we turn unsettled, and then possibly we really break the ridge through. So perhaps a wetter spell through the middle part of January, and possibly as that ridge begins to pull back towards Bermuda, getting a bit colder as well. And then I think that continues into the final 10 days of the month, where this does look like could be the coldest part of the month, certainly based on what the Beijing Climate Centre is doing. So it has the ridge over towards the eastern seaboard of America, has this trough over the UK, and it is being pushed eastwards as well. We've got heights rising to the north, and that could well be turning the flow into sort of a northwesterly type situation. So I think that's trending colder there as we go through into the second half of January. I wouldn't want to go overboard with the cold signal, but I think compared to the first half, the Beijing Climate Centre is probably seeing a colder second half The temperature anomaly for the month is coming out average to a little bit milder than average, really. Although many central parts of Europe coming out cold on average. You're also seeing a cold on average month for Scandinavia as well. So it's quite a bit of cold around. As I say, I think it does trend colder into the second half of January. The precipitation anomaly, again, it's coming out more or less drier than average, so another fairly dry month being signalled there, continuing, as I say, the theme of dry and average conditions that set up back in the middle and latter part of the summer. So we've got a bit of a problem here because it's very similar to the December forecast, which went rather wrong, as I'm sure you have known, and sort of remember I talked about it a few minutes ago. So the idea is that the first half of January, I think, looks generally quite fairly mildish, really, and then we might go to something colder in the second half of the month. Now, the CFS is it is a scenario that would be greater for cold weather, but I'm not really buying what it's doing. I think it's perhaps gone a bit over the top with what is certainly right now a very cold signal for many parts of Europe. It is going to be really in the freezer over the next few days through Europe. But then I expect we'll get moderation, particularly in the north and west of Europe, as we go through into the end of this week and then on into the second week of January, by which time I would suspect the CFS will be starting to lessen that sort of blocking signal. So, I think for most parts of Europe, we probably do get a cold on average January, purely from the fact it could be so severely cold during the coming few days. It can take a lot to offset that through the remainder of the month, particularly cold down in the southeast of Europe. For the UK, it's a very hard forecast again. So I think we are going to have, I'm going to go for near average temperatures again this month. And again, I think the idea is that the first half is milder, the second half possibly holding the greatest prospect for some cold weather. But whether it ever gets truly cold, or whether we're just talking about sort of polar maritime airstreams, that is, I'm not sure about that at all. We may get at least one fairly potent cold spell. That's what I would expect is going to happen in the second half of January. It might be in the final week of the month, actually, but sometime around the middle to the latter stage of the month, I think we could get one really quite big shot of cold air, probably from the north. I think easters are going to be very difficult this year, but it may be from the east. I would suspect most likely to be from the north. That could bring some widespread snow to parts of the country, but I think by the end of the month it's probably going again as the Atlantic comes back in, so I don't think it'll lock in for several weeks. So that's the best I can do, really. And in terms of precipitation, I think we are looking at another dry and average month. That's very well signalled from the models, and I'm not really seeing anything that would deviate from that. I don't think the Atlantic's going to have a huge ramp up, and so we go to a very wet spell like we've had over the past few years. So I suspect we would have a dry and average month. It's just the temperatures that are problematical. Fairly mildish in the first half, probably colder in the second half. Whether we get truly cold, very difficult to say. And as a result, temperatures come out very close to average, maybe a little bit on the cold and average side, and that's particularly most likely, I would have thought, for the north. The south, probably a little bit on the milder than average side, most likely. But again, not a great deviation is expected this month. And there could be one really quite potent cold spell in there, probably from the north, and probably sometime in the second half of the month. If it happens, it could be our coldest spell since the winter of 2013. But I would suspect it's a fairly low risk of that coming off, so I wouldn't rate it all that highly, but there is the potential there for something colder, perhaps significantly so and with snow in the second half of January. Finally, just have a very quick sneak peek at February, and this is CFS-B2 700 millibar high anomaly for February, placing a ridge through most parts of central southern Europe. Got the trough in the Atlantic, and the jet stream is coming through with the southwesterly flow like that. So it looks fairly mild and Atlantic driven for February. But January has changed a lot with these charts over the past week or so. So I wouldn't worry at all about that. The general idea for most of long-range forecasts was for a front-loaded winter with the coldest of weather early on and then trending milder later. It could be that we're going to have the complete flip of that and February comes out as the coldest. I wouldn't totally rule out that possibility. Because one of these winter forecasts never could really pinpoint 1 month down. That's like being most coldest. We thought maybe January, but it was very low probability for that. We couldn't really pinpoint a month that was likely to be the coldest of the winter. So it might be that February, when we come to February forecast in a month's time, will look very different to what that 700 millibar height anomaly is showing. So back to January, worry about February when we get to it. GarsWeatherVids.com January 2017 forecast is for a significantly drier than average month. Temperatures coming out near normal, fairly mildish in the first half, and then probably colder in the second half. There is the potential, albeit fairly low risk, but the potential is there for a significant spell of cold weather at some point in the second half of the month, probably coming via a northerly wind. If it happens, it would be the coldest spell since the winter of 2012-2013, and it could deliver fairly widespread snow, but I'd rate the chance probably no more but around 20-30%. The more likely scenario is that we have polar maritime type cold, which would deliver snow to Scotland and perhaps not all that much down in the south. Right, we'll see how it goes. As ever, I say, long-range forecasting is all highly experimental, so don't take it too seriously. But that's all for now, and thanks for watching. Later on today, we'll have a look at the weather for the next week to 10 days. Might have a look at the CFS weeklies as well. So come back to that later on. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.